Picture this. You're 7 years old, standing up in the front seat of your dad's sedan. No seatbelt, one hand on the dashboard, the other reaching for the radio dial. The vinyl is hot against your bare legs from sitting in the sun all afternoon. Your mom's smoking a cigarette with the windows barely cracked and the ash is getting dangerously long. The air smells like tobacco, cherry air freshener, and the faint sweetness of the bubblegum you've been chewing for the last hour. And in about 10 minutes, they're going to drop you off at the mall with $5 in your pocket and tell you to be back at the fountain in 4 hours, no way to call them. No way for them to reach you. Just you, your friends, and the entire mall to explore. If that scene makes you smile instead of gasp. You grew up in the 1980s. If you're sitting there nodding, remembering the feeling of that hot vinyl, the sound of your bike chain clicking as you pedaled away from home for an entire day, the taste of freeze pops that stained your tongue, bright blue, the grass stains on your knees that your mom would shake her head at later, then you're in the right place. If you love stepping back into the world we grew up in, now's the perfect time to hit that subscribe button. Because we're about to take a deep dive into memories that feel like they came from a completely different world. Welcome back to Timewashed Stories. This is where we revisit the moments, memories, and everyday life of the 70s, 80s, and 90s, one story at a time. We dig into the little details that made those decades feel the way they did. Today, we're stepping into what childhood really looked like 40 years ago. Some of these things will sound absolutely wild by today's standards. Some will make you laugh, some might make you wince, and all of them will remind you just how different the world used to be. Let's roll back the clock. 40 years ago, the world looked different. MTV was still new enough to feel revolutionary. You'd race home to catch music videos. Atari was in living rooms everywhere, and if you had one, you were automatically the popular house on the block. We didn't have the internet. No smartphones, no tablets, no 24-hour news cycle. Our social media was physical. It was showing up at someone's house, knocking on the door, and asking if they could come out and play. It was riding your bike to the park and seeing who else showed up. It was passing notes in class, folded into intricate shapes. Information moved slowly. If you wanted to know something, you looked it up in an encyclopedia. If you missed a TV show, you missed it. Maybe you'd catch it in reruns if you were lucky. And honestly, some of the things we did on a daily basis would probably get your parents arrested today. The world was looser. Rules were suggestions, and childhood had a kind of feral freedom that's almost impossible to explain to anyone who didn't live through it. Let's start with the most shocking part: cars. If you were a kid in the 80s, safety standards in cars were basically optional. Seatbelts existed. They'd been required in new cars for years, but actually using them? That was another story. Nobody wore seatbelts. They were just weird straps tucked into the seat, pushed down into the crack where the seat met the back. Maybe once or twice a year, someone would accidentally sit on the metal buckle, pull it out with an annoyed grunt, then shove it back down. You didn't buckle up. Your parents didn't buckle up. It just wasn't part of the routine. Getting in the car and putting on a seatbelt would have felt as strange as putting on a helmet to walk to the mailbox. Instead, as a kid, you claimed your territory in the front seat. That big, wide, vinyl-covered bench seat was prime real estate. You'd sit right in the middle, between your mom and dad, like you were part of the driving team. You could reach over and change the radio station. AM radio, scanning through static to find the one clear station. You could mess with the air vents, redirect them at your sister just to annoy her. And if you wanted to see over the dashboard, because you were too short sitting down, you just stood up. That's right. You stood up in a moving vehicle. You'd plant your feet on the seat, grab the back of the bench for balance, and watch the world go by through the windshield. And here's the kicker. Sometimes, if your dad was feeling generous, he'd pull you into his lap and let you steer the car, your tiny hands on the wheel, barely able to reach both sides, his hands resting underneath, cruising down a suburban street at 35 miles an hour. like it was the most normal bonding activity in the world. Nobody thought twice about it, but it gets better, or worse, depending on how you look at it. If your family had a station wagon, and it felt like half the families in America did, the back section wasn't for groceries, it was for kids. That rear-facing third row, or the open cargo area, was where kids rode. You'd climb back there, face the rear window, and spend the entire drive waving at cars behind you. You'd make faces at drivers, hold up signs you made from notebook paper. No seatbelt, no car seat. Just you, a thin layer of carpet, maybe a beach towel if your mom was feeling fancy, and the hope that your dad didn't slam on the brakes too hard. And if you lived in a rural area or your family had a pickup truck, kids rode in the bed like it was a carnival ride. You'd climb over the tailgate, sit on the ridged metal bed, and hold onto the side rail as your dad took off wind, whipping through your hair. Sun on your face, the smell of cut grass and gasoline, and summer all mixed together. You'd feel every bump, every turn that made you slide, every acceleration that pushed you back. It was thrilling. It was dangerous. And it was completely normal. Car seats? Yeah, they existed. But most people didn't buy them. They were bulky, expensive, hard to install, and even if parents did buy one, they'd use it twice before the kid complained and they gave up. Infants got held, toddlers sat on laps, older kids fended for themselves. And speaking of cars, here's one that really lands. If your mom or dad needed to run into the grocery store and the car was packed with kids, they didn't drag everyone inside. That would have been chaos. Wrangling 3 or 4 kids through a store, keeping them from grabbing things off shelves and begging for candy at checkout. So instead, they'd pull into a parking spot, turn off the engine, roll the windows down halfway and say, "I'll be right back. Don't touch anything. Don't fight." And then they'd leave for 20 minutes, sometimes longer. You'd sit there in the parking lot watching people walk by with their grocery carts. You'd fight with your siblings over who got to control the AM radio. Maybe there'd be a snack your mom left on the seat, crackers or fruit snacks, and you'd negotiate who got what. You'd play games. I Spy, Slug Bug, counting red cars versus blue cars. You'd draw pictures in the condensation on the windows if it was humid. You'd argue about absolutely nothing because you were bored and trapped. And nobody called the cops. Nobody even looked twice. Maybe a stranger would walk by, glance in, see a car full of kids and keep walking. Because that's just what people did. Today, you'd have police, social services, and the local news in that parking lot within minutes. There'd be outrage, debates about parenting, maybe charges filed. Back then, it was Tuesday. But the real hallmark of growing up in the 80s wasn't what happened in the car. It was what happened the moment you got out of it, because once you left the house, you were gone. Really, truly gone. You'd walk out the door in the morning, maybe after a bowl of cereal, maybe a Pop-Tart. You ate standing at the counter, maybe nothing, because you'd eat at someone's house later. You'd tell your mom, "I'm going outside." That was it. No details, no itinerary, no explanation of where outside was. Just, "I'm going outside." And your mom would say, "Okay, be home when the streetlights come on." And that was the entire conversation. You'd be gone until dinner, or later. Sometimes you'd stay for dinner at a friend's house, and your parents wouldn't even know until you came home at 8:30, smelling like someone else's spaghetti. You didn't ask permission to go to a friend's house 3 blocks away. You just went. You'd hop on your bike, rusty chain clicking with every pedal, handlebar grips worn smooth, maybe a baseball card, clothes pinned to the spokes, making that satisfying, flapping sound. And you'd ride across the neighborhood looking for action. And here's how you found your friends. You looked for the pile of bikes. If you rode past someone's house and saw 6 bikes lying in the grass, handlebars tangled together, kickstands ignored, wheels still slowly spinning, you knew that's where everyone was. You'd drop your bike on top of the pile and go knock, or you wouldn't even knock. You'd just walk around back and find everyone already deep into some game. If nobody was outside, you'd knock on doors. You'd stand on someone's porch and shout, "Can Mike come out?" If he could, great. If not, you'd move on to the next house. There were no play dates, no group texts, no Google calendars. You figured it out. You found your people, and you created an entire world out of nothing but time, imagination, and whatever was lying around. Sticks became swords. A cardboard box became a fort. A spaceship, a race car. The ditch behind the grocery store became the Amazon River. The construction site down the street, with piles of lumber and dirt, became your playground, even though there were definitely no trespassing signs you absolutely ignored. You'd build ramps out of plywood and cinder blocks and see who could jump their bike the farthest. You'd dig holes in empty lots for no reason other than to see how deep you could go. You'd climb trees until you were higher than you should have been, sitting on branches that bent under your weight, looking out over the neighborhood like you were on top of the world, and your parents had no idea where you were. They didn't need to know. As long as you were home when the streetlights came on, everything was fine. You could have been 2 blocks away or 2 miles away. Didn't matter. You were out. You were alive. You were having adventures. And when you rode your bike, which you did constantly, you didn't wear a helmet. Helmets weren't even a thing most kids knew existed. You'd see them maybe in a BMX magazine, worn by professional riders. But for regular kids, forget it. You'd get laughed out of the cul-de-sac. The idea of wearing a helmet to ride to your friend's house would have been like wearing a life jacket to take a bath. Technically safer, but completely ridiculous. Same with elbow pads and knee pads. If you wore those, you were trying too hard. The whole point was to go fast, take risks, see what happened. You'd ride with no hands. You'd stand on the pedals and coast down hills, wind rushing past. You'd try to pop wheelies in the middle of the street. And when you wiped out, which you did often, you got back up, brushed off the gravel, and showed your friends the bloody knee like it was a trophy. Scars were proof you were living. Nobody panicked. Nobody rushed you to urgent care. You went inside, ran it under the faucet, maybe got a Band-Aid if your mom was feeling fancy, and then you went back outside. Now, if you did end up too far from home, too late, if you lost track of time and suddenly realized the sun was setting and you were halfway across town, you didn't pull out your phone because you didn't have one. Instead, you found a payphone. They were everywhere back then. Outside gas stations, in front of grocery stores, in malls, on random street corners, scratched up metal boxes, with a handset that smelled faintly like cigarettes and somebody else's breath. The cord was always twisted into a chaotic spiral. The buttons were sticky. If you had a quarter, great. You'd drop it in, hear that satisfying clink, and call home. But if you didn't have change, and most kids didn't, you made a collect call. You'd dial 0 for the operator. A voice would come on. "Operator, I need to make a collect call. What number?" You'd give them your home number and your name, and this is where it got creative. You didn't have to give your actual name. So you'd say something like, "I'm at the community center," all in one breath. The operator would call your house. Your mom would answer, and the operator would say, "You have a collect call from, I'm at the community center. Do you accept the charges?" Your mom would say, "No," because now she knew where you were, message delivered. No charges accepted. 20 minutes later, your dad would pull up, toss your bike in the trunk, and drive you home without saying much. Maybe a, "You know what time it is?" but mostly silence, because this was just part of the deal. That was the rule, the one hard rule most of us had. Be home when the streetlights come on. That was the boundary. You could go anywhere, do anything, but when those streetlights flickered on, one by one, down your street, you needed to be heading home. You'd be in the middle of a game, kickball, manhunt, whatever, and someone would glance up, see the first light glowing that orange-yellow color, and yell, "Streetlights, game over," Everyone scattered. You'd grab your bike, shout quick goodbyes, and pedal as fast as you could, racing the darkness home. If you got home after the streetlights came on, you'd get in trouble. Your mom would give you that look, that I told you when to be home look. Maybe you couldn't go out the next day, but if you made it home right as they came on, slipping in just in time, you were golden. Let's talk about smoking, because if there's one thing that really shows how different the 80s were, it's this. Today, you can't smoke within so many feet of most buildings. You can't smoke in restaurants, bars, or offices. There are warning labels, public health campaigns, social stigma. But in the 1980s, smoking was everywhere. Your parents smoked in the house. Your dad would sit in his recliner after dinner, light up, and read the newspaper with smoke curling toward the ceiling. Your mom would smoke while cooking, cigarette balanced on the counter. They smoked in the car, windows barely cracked, kids in the back seat, breathing it all in. You'd watch the smoke get sucked toward that tiny gap at the top of the window. The whole car smelled like it. Your clothes absorbed it. Secondhand smoke wasn't a concern. It was just the air. You'd go to a restaurant, and the hostess would ask, smoking or non-smoking? And even if you sat in non-smoking, it didn't matter. There was no wall between sections, just an imaginary line. So you'd sit there, eating your burger while smoke from the table 10 feet away drifted over. The whole place smelled like an ashtray. Your clothes smelled like smoke when you left. People smoked in waiting rooms. Doctors' offices had ashtrays. Hospitals had smoking areas inside the building. Office buildings had ashtrays on desks, in conference rooms. Shopping malls had ashtrays every few steps. Airplanes had smoking sections. You could light up at 30,000 feet. And here's the wildest part. There were cigarette vending machines. You'd see them outside diners, in bowling alleys, in hotel lobbies. Big machines with pictures of different cigarette brands. Marlboro, Camel, Virginia Slims. You'd drop in a few quarters, pull the knob, and out came a pack of cigarettes. No ID check. No verification. Nothing. Kids couldn't legally buy cigarettes, but we could be sent to buy them. Your mom would realize she was out and say, ride your bike to the corner store and pick me up a pack of Virginia Slims. She'd hand you a note, written on scratch paper, that said, please sell my son a pack of Virginia Slims. Thank you. And she'd sign it. Sometimes she'd give you a blank check, just signed at the bottom, with the rest left empty for the cashier to fill in. You'd ride to the store, hand over the note, and check. And the cashier would reach back, grab the cigarettes, and hand them over without blinking. Because that's just how it was. A lot of us were latchkey kids. The term comes from the key you wore around your neck. A house key, threaded onto a shoelace or ball chain, worn like a necklace under your shirt. Being a latchkey kid meant you came home from school to an empty house. Both parents were working, so you'd get off the bus, walk up to your door, pull out that key, unlock it, and let yourself in. And then you were on your own. You'd drop your backpack, kick off your shoes, and figure out the afternoon. Maybe make a snack, peanut butter crackers, cereal, Kool-Aid you mixed yourself. Maybe turn on the TV and watch cartoons. Maybe do your homework. If you were the oldest, you might watch younger siblings, keep them from killing each other, break up fights, try to keep the house from burning down. And your parents didn't worry. If you were old enough to dial 911, if you knew your address, knew your parents' work numbers, you were old enough to be home alone. There were no nannies, no after-school programs unless you played sports. Just you, the house, and a few hours of freedom. And it made you independent. You learned how to be bored, how to entertain yourself, how to solve problems without an adult hovering, how to make decisions on your own. You learned that being alone wasn't automatically scary, that you could handle things. Discipline back then was direct. If you misbehaved, if you talked back, if you got out of line, physical punishment was on the table. A swat from your parents, a paddle from the principal, a smack on the hand from your teacher. And it wasn't considered abuse. It was considered parenting. It was discipline. It was what happened when kids stepped out of line, and everyone, parents, teachers, coaches, was on the same page. Your parents might spank you with their hand, or a wooden spoon, or a belt, and 5 minutes later, it was over. The lesson was delivered, and life moved on. At school, some principals kept paddles in their offices, actual wooden paddles, sometimes with holes drilled in them. If you got sent to the principal's office for fighting or talking back, you might get swats. You'd bend over, and the principal would give you a few whacks. Then you'd go back to class. Red-faced, maybe teary-eyed, definitely sore. And your parents would find out and be angry at you for getting in trouble in the first place. Times have changed, and for good reason. But in the 80s, this was standard. You learned real quick what the boundaries were. Peanut allergies existed in the 1980s, but nobody talked about them. Kids brought peanut butter sandwiches to school every day. Peanut butter and jelly was the default lunch. Lunchrooms smelled like peanut butter. Lunch tables were sticky with jelly. There were no peanut-free tables, no allergy warnings sent home, no bans on certain snacks. If a kid had a peanut allergy, they just avoided peanuts and hoped for the best. EpiPens didn't hit the market until 1987. So before that, if you had a severe allergy, there wasn't an easy way to treat a reaction. You'd have to get to a hospital fast. It sounds insane now, but back then, food allergies weren't discussed much, and the systems to manage them just weren't there. If you were a teenager in the 80s, you didn't have Instagram or TikTok. Your social media was the mall. That's where you went to see and be seen, to show off your new shoes, your acid-washed jeans, your members-only jacket, to find out who was dating who, to exist in the same space as other people your age. You'd meet your friends at the food court, that central hub with the smell of pizza, fried chicken, and cinnamon rolls all mixing together. You'd pool your money, buy a slice of pizza or fries, and split it between 4 people. And then you'd walk for hours. You'd wander through every store, even ones you'd never buy from. Try on clothes you couldn't afford, spray perfume samples, flip through CDs or cassettes at the music store, stop at the arcade if you had quarters, sit on benches and people watch, lean against the railing on the second floor and look down. Your parents would drop you off at the main entrance at noon, tell you to meet them back there at 4 or 5, and leave. You'd roam the entire mall completely unsupervised. And it was fine. Security guards didn't follow you. Store employees didn't ask where your parents were. Today, teenagers who hang out too long get accused of loitering. Some malls have curfews, no one under 18 without an adult after a certain time. Back then, loitering was the activity. The mall was your social hub. It was where life happened. Here's one that really blows younger minds. Chickenpox parties. Before there was a vaccine, which didn't become standard until the mid-1990s. Parents had a strategy. Get it over with while they're young. The thinking was that chickenpox was worse if you got it as an adult. So if it was going around and one kid got it, parents would deliberately expose their kids. They'd have a little get-together. Let the kids play together, share toys, drink from the same cups. The goal was to pass the virus along a week later. Everyone would break out in itchy red spots. You'd spend a week or 2 covered in calamine lotion, wearing loose clothes. You'd sit in oatmeal baths. Your mom would tell you not to scratch, and you'd scratch anyway and end up with scars. But then it was done. You'd had chickenpox. You were immune. It sounds wild now, deliberately infecting children. But back then, it was practical parenting. You couldn't prevent it, so you controlled when it happened. Let's talk about movies, because the rating system in the early 80s was its own kind of chaos. The PG-13 rating didn't exist until July 1st, 1984. Before that, you had G, PG, and R. That's it. And PG movies in the early 80s were wild. The gap between PG and R was enormous. Take Airplane, which came out in 1980, rated PG, and it was filled with sexual innuendo, drug references, adult humor, and even brief nudity. There's a scene where a woman's breasts are shown in a PG movie. By today's standards, it would easily be PG-13, maybe even flirting with R, or Gremlins and Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, both from 1984, both rated PG. Gremlins had creatures violently killed, exploded in microwaves, blended in kitchen appliances. Temple of Doom had a scene where a man's beating heart was ripped from his chest on screen. Parents took their young kids, expecting family-friendly content, and walked out traumatized. That backlash is what led to PG-13. Steven Spielberg himself suggested it. People realized there needed to be something between PG and R. So on August 10, 1984, Red Dawn became the first PG-13 movie ever released, an action film about teenagers fighting a Soviet invasion, starring Patrick Swayze and Charlie Sheen. Suddenly, the rating system made more sense. PG-13 became the sweet spot for blockbusters. But before that, it was the Wild West. A lot of us saw things in family movies that probably should have waited. There were 1,000 other little details that made the 80s what it was, like the TV Guide, that thick little magazine that came out every week, listing every show on every channel. You'd flip through it, circle the shows you wanted to watch, and plan your week around them. Because if you missed a show, it was gone. No DVR, no streaming, no on-demand, or how long-distance phone calls were expensive. You didn't just call someone in another state to chat. Long distance cost money. So you'd wait until after 9 p.m. when rates went down, or keep the call short. Hi, Grandma, love you, here's Mom. 5 minutes max. Or how you'd take an entire roll of film over weeks. Birthday party, family vacation, random Tuesday. And then you'd finish the roll, take it to the drugstore, drop it off, and wait a week. When you picked up your photos, you'd open that envelope right in the parking lot. Half would be blurry or overexposed, but you kept them anyway. Or recording songs off the radio onto cassette tapes. You'd sit with your finger hovering over the record button, waiting for the DJ to stop talking. And if you got the whole song without the DJ talking over it, victory. Or making mixtapes for your friends or your crush. Carefully curating songs, writing the track list in your best handwriting. Giving someone a mixtape meant something. It was time. It was effort. Or Saturday morning cartoons. You'd wake up early and plant yourself in front of the TV for 4 solid hours. He-Man, Transformers, G.I. Joe, Smurfs. Bowl of cereal in your lap, still in your pajamas. And when noon hit and they ended, the magic was over. You'd go outside, or having to get up to change the channel on the TV. No remote, or if you had one, it was attached with a cord. So you were the remote. Your parents would say, change it to channel 5, and you'd get up, turn the dial, and sit back down. Or summer feeling endless. 3 months with no structure, nothing to do except exist. You'd lose track of what day it was, and nobody worried about you being productive. Summer was for being a kid. Growing up in the 1980s was a completely different experience. We had a kind of freedom that would be unthinkable today. The kind of freedom that, when you describe it to younger people, they look at you like you're making it up. But we're not. That's just how it was. We took risks that would horrify modern parents. We did things that would get CPS called. We lived in a world where the rules were still being written, where safety standards were suggestions, where childhood was a little wild, a little dangerous, and completely unsupervised. And somehow, most of us survived. A lot has changed in 40 years, some for the better. Absolutely, safety standards have improved. We understand health risks better. We're more aware of dangers our parents didn't think about. Car seats save lives. Helmets prevent brain injuries. Seatbelts are non-negotiable. We know more about secondhand smoke, about allergies, about the long-term effects of things we thought were harmless. We have technology that keeps kids safer, that lets parents stay connected, that provides help in emergencies. Those are good things, important things, things that have saved countless lives. But there's something bittersweet about looking back. Because for all its chaos and recklessness, there was magic to it. There was trust. Trust in kids to figure things out, to handle themselves, to make decisions, or make bad decisions and learn from them. There was belief that scrapes and bruises were just part of growing up, that kids were tougher than people gave them credit for. And there was space, physical space to roam, to explore, to get lost, and find your way back. Mental space to be bored, to daydream, to create your own entertainment. We learned self-reliance because we had to. We learned problem solving because there wasn't always an adult around. We learned social skills by negotiating with other kids face to face, working out conflicts without parental mediation. We learned that the world was mostly safe, even though we were constantly doing things that maybe weren't. We learned to trust ourselves, trust our instincts, trust our ability to navigate the world. I'm not saying we should go back. I'm not advocating for kids riding in truck beds or being left in hot cars. The improvements in child safety are real and valuable, but something was lost. That wild, unstructured freedom is harder to find now. Kids today grow up with more supervision, more structure, more safety than we ever had. That's not bad, it's just different. When I think about the childhood my generation had versus now, I feel grateful we got to grow up when we did. That we got to experience that moment when kids could disappear for entire days and come home covered in dirt, when summers stretched forever, when your bike was freedom and the world was yours to explore. Those of us who lived through it carry those memories like a secret language, a shared experience that feels almost mythical now. And maybe that's okay. Maybe every generation has their "you had to be there" childhood. But man, we really did have to be there, because the 1980s were something else. So I want to hear from you. What do you remember from growing up in the 80s? What's the one thing you did that would absolutely shock people today? The freedom you had that seems impossible now? The risks you took that make you shake your head? Drop it in the comments. I love reading these stories. I love hearing what everyone remembers, what stood out, what made your 80s childhood unique. And if you are not from that era, but you're watching this thinking, wait, this is real? This actually happened? Yeah, it did. Welcome to the world we grew up in. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this trip down memory lane, make sure you're subscribed because we've got plenty more stories like this coming. Hit that like button if this brought back memories, and I'll see you in the next one.